couple of months ago, the CEO of Kellogg's, the breakfast cereal company, Gary Pilnick, offered his suggestion for families struggling to put food on the table right now. Hey, maybe you should have cereal for breakfast. Much more affordable and only $1 per bowl. Okay, I'm paraphrasing and I'm adding a bit of a sarcastic tone, but that's basically what he said. The interviewer asked him to clarify, saying, that might not land the right way right now. Pilnick doubled down. Oh, no. It's landing really well right now. No, it wasn't. Many news headlines compared his comments to "let them eat cake," with The Guardian in the UK splashing the headline, "Let them eat flakes." Another example, a few weeks ago, Kirk Tanner, the CEO of Wendy's, burgers and fries, Wendy's, he ad-libbed something in an analyst call, which is really no different from a media interview, about surge pricing. Wendy's customers were indignant about the idea of a Baconator jumping in price just because it's lunchtime. Wendy's quickly clarified what he meant was dynamic discounts, not dynamic surges in price. Why is it senior executives often are still not listening to their PR advisors? What don't they get about the potential damage from inconsistent messaging, lost opportunities, or internal morale? Today, on Stories and Strategies, finding a CEO who understands and believes in the value of PR. Is it a lack of understanding about what we do? Or is what we're doing yielding a lack of understanding? My name is Doug Downs. My guest this week is Michelle Garrett, joining today from Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Doug. How are you?
I'm good. You've been in, I was looking at the weather app. You've been in kind of a little heat wave. What's going on? How are you staying cool?
I don't go outside a lot during the day. I've been here, working away, but next week is going to be even hotter, I think. So we're getting some pretty toasty temperatures.
I know that feeling. You just sort of look out the window during a little break. Oh, yeah, there's weather out there. You sort of forget for a bit. Michelle, you are a freelance PR consultant and writer. Some of your focus includes small businesses, startups, marketing agencies, and corporations around the world. Now, you've been ranked in the top 3 on the PR measurement X Influencer Index. Can I still call it X? Because you're plugged into X and Twitter. That's the name, right? X.
I call it Twitter, but technically it's X.
Right. That influencer index was published by Cometric, and you have been named one of the most influential tech PR professionals in the world by Propel. You also have a new book out called B2B PR that Gets Results. Let's talk about that as we wrap up the episode here.
Sure.
And 4th time on Stories and Strategies. So obviously you're a friend. We outlined those 2 examples from Kellogg's and Wendy's off the top. Let me ask you, just point blank.
Yeah.
Do some execs just not get what we do? Do they not respect what we do? Or do they just ignore what we do? Do they think they're so superior they don't need to take counsel because they talk every day, all day, so they don't need somebody to help them with their talking? What's going on here?
It's something really. And you see it repeatedly, right? It happens again and again and again. I think sometimes they get caught off guard maybe with a question. And although they should know how to answer the question, they're a little out of touch. In the case of the Kellogg's example, and he doubled down on it.
He did.
That part I don't understand. I could see maybe getting a question that you weren't expecting and kind of being like, wow, okay, here's my answer, just off the cuff. And then, you should probably know better even in the first instance, but then to double down on it, yikes.
Yeah. And obviously we do need senior execs, whether it's the CEO or the chair of the board, just someone in that so-called C-suite. We need them to be able to speak well. They add personality to the brand. And more younger audiences are quite frankly demanding that the leaders step forward because they want to know what the brand stands for before they're going to patronize the brand at all.
Right.
I guess how important is it for execs to take that to heart?
I think that's a very interesting and important point to make because I have kids. I have a teenager and a young 20 something. And yeah, they are very, anti-capitalism. And any time they can use, there's somebody makes a mistake like this, everybody jumps on it, right? I mean, that
Like a
generation
proof point.
is ready to
Yeah.
just tear them apart, And so I think this is going to play a role moving forward. And maybe we'll see, I don't know, maybe they'll be hiring people who are more in tune with, that kind of thinking and, to coach them and help them along with their messages. And I think they all just need media training. Even a refresher occasionally for experienced folks is not a terrible idea.
That's a neat point because I do media training and presentation coaching. And I mean, not to oversimplify it, but the heart of it is to be disciplined in how you choose to communicate and when you choose to communicate. And it's not that you can't go down some of these ad lib paths. You can show some personality.
Right.
I'll use a football analogy. Columbus, football is a big deal in Ohio, right? Buckeyes. You can ad lib during the play, but that ad lib is almost well rehearsed.
Mm-hmm.
The line still needs to know which way the quarterback is going.
Right.
How do we, as comms people, particularly those of us who do work in that field where we're coaching executives, how do we get them to adhere to what we're saying? So many times I've had an executive after a workshop, oh yeah, that's great. I love it. It's great. And I'll check in with them 6 months later as they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all of it's gone. They didn't put any of it into practice. Maybe some of this, the onus is on us to coach a little better.
Yeah, I mean, I think even for experienced spokespeople, it doesn't hurt to have even just to review key messages and maybe to develop specific key messages for a specific interview, especially if it's with a high-level media outlet, for example. If you're on a stage that a lot of people are paying attention to, it's going to matter that you're prepared. And by prepared, I don't mean you've done a lot of speaking in public. It means knowing what you're going to say in this particular instance to this audience. And that is, I don't think you can ever over prepare, but maybe ego does play into it sometimes.
Yeah, honestly, I've long felt one of the hurdles for senior leaders is their own confidence. You can call it ego. I'll use the positive frame, confidence. That confidence is part of how they got there. That's part of how they got to the top. They have a degree of self-confidence, a degree. If any of them have absolute and full confidence, I'm really nervous about them because they should have a little bit that's pulling them back. And often the advice we provide as comms advisors is counter to intuition. Right. And that's really where we make our money. That's where we provide our value is when we can say, okay, that would seem the obvious place to go, but here's why I don't want you to do that.
Right.
Do you see that coming as well? That there's a degree of overconfidence and they ignore those moments in time when we're saying, this is the counterintuitive advice that I have.
I think absolutely it happens, right? And I think probably some comms teams just are tearing their hair out on any given day because, it's like, wow, we did the best we could and here's what we ended up with, and now we got to clean up the mess. And that's the thing I think that some of the executives don't remember is that when they're out there putting their foot in their mouth, for example, then we're back here trying to sweep up the mess behind them. And that's not really a good look. It would be better to probably say less. I think that's another thing. They get too comfortable. They're just shooting from the hip. They're just, they like to hear themselves talk. I'm whispering that because I don't want it to sound like it probably sounds, but in some cases it's true.
I think I think they hit the point. There's this Dunning-Kruger curve, and the idea, psychological term, is that at the top of the curve, there are some people who are extremely confident and dumb as an orange. And then as you get smarter, you start to lose confidence. Your technical ability goes up, but you start suffering. It's not FOMO. What's the term for when you start realizing you don't know everything? And
Imposter syndrome?
yes, you start developing your imposter syndrome, and you get to the very bottom, and it's when you start coming back around and you start realizing, no, I do have some knowledge, and it's okay for me to express it. And then ultimately, we do have some extremely intelligent people who aren't afraid to share, and I'm glad they do share. Kind of like that. The average executive, I don't know if they're on the left side or the right side of that curve. I suppose they're not dumb as an orange, but they can sure come across that way if they're not paying attention to communication strategies.
Sure. I think the best C-suite executives understand that they should be kind of, working together with their comms team. And that's what, I wrote about that in my newsletter the other day about how they really need to be more in sync with their comms team or their lead communication person, chief communication officer, whatever it might be at a particular company. And I hope, and I can see to some degree that those folks are getting pulled in more often and that the executives are paying a little bit more attention to what they bring to the table. And I think that's a very positive development.
And in your newsletter, which, by the way, if you haven't signed up for Michelle's newsletter, it's a good one. Do. You have a good example of a CEO understanding communication strategies, the Land O'Lakes example.
Yes, that I heard their chief communication officer speak at Content Marketing World, and she talked all about PR as part of their content program. Their content and PR to me go together hand in hand, and I talk about that frequently. But in this case, the CEO just played a huge role in it. And I think anytime you have that in your toolbox, you are way ahead of the game, because if the CEO, the C-suite is on board with what you're doing, it's going to add so much to your efforts. If they're a champion of PR, if they're willing to do what you ask, it just makes a huge difference. And Land O'Lakes is a great example of that. They ended up on 60 Minutes. They were all over the place. And it was really because the CEO and the chief communication officer worked together to get, she was more than willing to just do whatever it took to get out there on behalf of the company.
Let me ask you this, because I'm still trying to nail down what is it that stops us as the comms leaders from getting that point across at that head table. Mm-hmm. I've also had a thought that those who are in the role where they can get close to the CEO, so the VP of comms or whatever the role title is, sometimes they're afraid to counter anything the CEO says, and they almost see their job as, I need to buddy up to them to become their right hand, and then filter it down to the rest of my staff. Do you see the same?
I think it does happen. I really think in the best case scenario, you want someone in that role who is going to push back. And I see that. I mean, I do work with some CEOs at my clients' companies. However, I think that PR in general needs to push back a little bit more and not just be the yes department, the yes person, the yes team, whatever it is. I think that we need to have a little bit more confidence in our ability to understand perhaps what they don't, because we are the eyes and ears. We're out there watching, listening, looking at the trends, and hopefully just paying attention to what's going on to a point where we could advise them and give them some perspective that they may not otherwise have.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, there is no other department that has the 360 on the company. Every other department is focused on its deliverables, right? We're the only ones that have that full vision.
Right. And they would be really smart to remember that. And again, I think on the PR side of things, we do need to have a little bit more confidence in pushing back. And if we're not in a place where we can do that, I think, that's an indication that might not be a good place to be, or we might need to slowly, gently work our way in that direction so that we can, because if you're just a yes person in PR, I don't know how much value you're really bringing to the table.
Perfect. You've got a new book out, B2B PR that gets results. Tell me about the book.
I do have a new book. I'm so excited. I mean, I have been writing forever. All right. So I've been writing for my blog. I've been writing contributed articles for other publications. Of course, I've talked to death about PR and I'm very passionate about it. And this is all kind of the culmination of those efforts over the years. And I just couldn't be more thrilled to have it out there.
Okay. Give me a couple little snippets, a couple of value nuggets that are from it, either advice or stories that are in the book. What a proud moment.
Oh, well, I mean, one of my favorite chapters is really the first chapter where I kind of talk about the problem that we have in the industry, in the public relations industry, where we have clients that, again, I think it comes back to the being a yes person. They bring an agency in, the agency just tells them what they want to hear. The agency pulls a list from a media database, spams out thousands of pitches to reporters who are just like, please stop spamming us. Mm-hmm. And this whole thing is just a cycle that goes back and forth. And the client thinks, we didn't get anything out of this. PR doesn't work. They hire another agency. The process starts over again. So that's how the book opens. And to me, that is something that we just need to be talking about more.
If I'm a senior exec, how do I know a good agency from a bad one?
That's a good question too. I mean, I think you want to know who's going to be working on your account on a day-to-day basis. Of course, they're going to bring in the big guns to pitch you and try to sell you. Mm-hmm. But then if they assign the junior folks, and there's nothing wrong with being a junior PR person, don't get me wrong. But you do want to know who's doing the work, because that's ultimately where the rubber will meet the road. And I'm going to tell you right now, the vice president that pitched you is not going to be the one that's actually working on your business and trying to get the coverage and trying to get the results. And, I worked in an agency before I went out on my own. They're not all the same, but there are a lot of practices at agencies that sometimes are, a little questionable maybe.
So that goes to, if you have a choice between a big agency, a medium agency, and a small PR person who's hung up a shingle,
right?
Maybe the medium and the experienced shingle is the way to go.
It could be. And it does depend on the size of your company and the industry and all those things, the size of your internal team. I often work with companies that have a one-person marketing department. They don't have anybody dedicated to PR at all. And so I can help out doing writing, doing media relations, and coaching executives and all those things. But, if you're a big company, you probably need, like, I remember when I was in Silicon Valley working in an agency, sometimes the companies would work with more than one agency and they'd have multiple teams from the, like Microsoft has, I don't know how many agencies I work with, but, it depends on the size of the company. My book is really written with smaller companies. I usually say less than 500 or so employees. That's kind of where I'm coming from, because I think a lot of these things, including the technology, can be a little bit of overkill for these smaller businesses that kind of just need some media coverage. They need some positioning. They need some thought leadership, those kinds of things. And that's something that a consultant or a smaller agency could help you do.
And just need to see how the strategies they've built for their business, there are marketing strategies that align with those. You're not too small.
Right. And I think that's really important too, because and also they don't know that they have interesting things to talk about.
Right.
Because sometimes I go into my manufacturing clients, for example, I'm like, wow, what does that machine do? And then they'll show me, and maybe I'm a nerd, but I think it's really interesting to see how things are made and created. And, and I think those stories are interesting. And then how their customers are using what they produce as well, the machinery, the equipment, solutions, whatever it is. I think those stories are really interesting.
Michelle, so good. Thank you for this. Great to see you again.
Good to see you, Doug. Thank you so much for having me.
If you'd like to send a message to my guest, Michelle Garrett, we've got her contact information in the show notes. Stories and Strategies, co-production of JGR Communications and Stories and Strategies podcast. If you like this episode, leave us a rating and possibly a review. Those mean a ton to us. We're also on YouTube and YouTube Music, full audio episodes, and we publish short video segments as well. Thank you to our producer, Emily Page. Gold star as always. Lastly, do us a favor for this episode to one friend. Thanks for listening.